Hi, Dr. Rob.
Good day to you, Tammy. Nice to see you. I like that. Yeah, by the way, I was going to comment earlier, but I like the pink and the blue. I feel like we're well matched today.
There you go.
So everybody, my name is Rob Weiss. I've been working in the field of intimacy disorders and sexual addiction for probably about 25 years. And we've created this wonderful space where I think it's wonderful, where you guys can ask questions and spend time trying to figure out whatever it is you want to figure out. We don't charge you. We're not giving you therapy. We're not doing 12-step work with you, but I am here as an expert to answer questions. And I also do this on Friday nights on another site. I think it's really important that whether you ever get to see a professional or an expert or not, that at least you get to understand things in this really embarrassing and uncomfortable area. So sex addiction, love addiction, intimacy disorders, all the way to sexual avoidance and intimacy avoidance, the people who don't date and don't have sex and all that, is really the whole ground that we cover. And we include those folks who have drug problems related to sex and intimacy. So I'm here to answer questions about any and all of that. And Tammy lines up the questions and off we go. So would you like to make that happen, Tam?
Sure. And off we go. I am the partner of an SA new in recovery. Can you explain the 3 circles used in SAA? Is the inner one behaviors that the SA wants to stop, the middle one that leads to getting them to the inner circle, and the outer circle how they want to behave for recovery?
Yeah, so let me make that a little bit broader. So I try to use questions that people ask to make them bigger for everybody to make use of. So if you think about someone who's an alcoholic or even a gambler, those folks really have the ability to stop their behavior. You can never drink again if you choose not to. You can never go to a casino or any of that kind of stuff. You can put those things away. And if you're addicted to them, you can still have a pretty healthy life and not engage in drinking or gambling. But if you have a problem with naturally occurring functions, like things that you want to enjoy in life, but for some of us have run off the rails, like food or sex. I wouldn't say that someone is being successful in their recovery around food if they stopped eating, right? So elimination when we're dealing with sexual issues is not really the goal. The goal is to divide up, if you will, the parts of our sexual behavior that are really, really problematic, that are costing us consequences, however we define those consequences: relationship, work, time, family, all of that, and diseases. And we define that and we say, well, we put that kind of in the middle of a circle. And we say, you know what, we're going to put a big circle around our most problematic behaviors. And we will call that an inner circle. This whole plan comes from Sex Addicts Anonymous, is where it really originally comes from. But in any case, so we put a boundary around our most problematic sexual behaviors, and that's different for different people. Like you can imagine, if I'm single, the sexual behaviors that are problematic for me as a single person are going to be very different than if I've been married for 20 years and I have a committed monogamous relationship. Then I might have very different. So they really are something that we work out with a therapist, that we work out with a sponsor in a 12-step program, and we set kind of in stone. And once these rules are set up, or these boundaries, this is how we live around sex. And we don't make other choices around our sexual life without consulting with one of the people who has helped us devise this plan before we might change it. So in the middle, there are 3 circles. In the middle circle, in the center circle, sorry, I can't draw on the screen.
Yeah.
Are the most concerning behaviors, and the ones that are absolutely the ones, if I do this, I've had a slip, it's like someone who had a drink, and I have to avoid those completely. And then, as you said, the middle circle, the next circle around, are kind of the warning signs. For a sex addict, it's stuff like spending too much time alone, or not making plans for a weekend, or traveling, things that I know can be triggering. It can be time with certain family, or getting in a fight with somebody, or not going to the gym regularly, or whatever it is that tells me I'm not doing well or I'm approaching a difficult situation. And all of those are warning signs. They go in the middle circle. And then on the outer circle, the 3rd circle, if you will, that encompasses all of them. And it really is the largest one, in my opinion. It's the one that's the most important. Beyond stopping the behavior, is that those of us who are looking to feel better by choosing some intense behavior to distract ourselves, like sexual acting out, that doesn't mean that when we stop the sexual behavior, we don't still need to feel good or better. It's just we want to find a whole bunch of maybe little things, little by a sex addict standards, by most people it's having a good life, but little things like meditation, time with friends, spending time with my kids, working on a hobby or education, getting involved in my spiritual life, things that most gardening, you know, it can be the outer circle is about what brings me pleasure, what makes me happy, and what brings me peace and healing day to day in little teeny pieces so that I can begin to calm my life down and make it work rather than running for these intense highs and lows. And the last thing I'll say about that is I really believe that most people struggle not so much to end the behavior once they're willing to end it. But emotionally, the hardest part is actually, and this might surprise some of you spouses, is us addicts beginning to take better care of our emotional lives and our creative lives and our spiritual lives. We've been so busy not attending to ourselves in any way other than sex. So anyway, thanks, Tammy.
Thank you. What should an addict do to seek reconciliation with a spouse he blames for his addiction?
Well, that feels like a tricky question there, Tammy. I think there's a feeling wrapped around that question above somewhere. Can you, I think maybe will you interpret that and maybe into one or two questions? I think you could do that for us.
First thing I saw was the blaming.
Okay, so go ahead and read the question.
So what should an addict do to seek reconciliation? That would be one piece of it. With a spouse he blames for his addiction.
Okay, so how can I heal something with my spouse? But then how can I heal my issues with that spouse if I blame them? But this feels like a spouse who's asking the question somehow.
Oh, see, I took it the other way. I thought the addict was going like, I'm blaming my spouse for my addiction and I want to reconcile, but I'm still blaming that person.
If that's the case, let's ask.
So you can clarify if whoever wrote that, because it's anonymous. So
we could do it both ways.
All right, there you go.
So here, let's do it. Ask the question again, and we'll do it like we'll do it the second way.
Okay. What should an addict do to seek reconciliation with a spouse he blames for his addiction?
Okay. Well, if I'm the addict and I blame my spouse, then I don't get the point of recovery. I'm missing something because my spouse is never responsible ever for my addiction or any of my acting out. I may be unhappy with my spouse or I may be unhappy with my relationship, but there are many things I can do other than go have sex or whatever it is that is acting out. So the first thing I think, the first recovery point, just for the person who's the addict, is to take that pointing finger away from their spouse. I did this because you, and put the finger back on them because we are always responsible for our adult actions and choices. And the second thing is, there is no reconciliation for you and your spouse if you're an addict who's blaming your spouse for your problem. Now you want to do it the other way?
Yes, because the other way I've gotten clarification, the way you interpreted it is how it actually is. So, So how do you, how would an addict reconcile with a spouse from the spouse's standpoint if she's being blamed for?
So I mean, I think, so if my mate was seeking to reconcile with me, but they also held this resentment or this sense of, I don't know, wanting to cast the burden on me, I think that I wouldn't be able to take that in. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I think as a spouse, I would be very angry that it would be part of my anger that somehow there's still some responsibility being put on me when clearly all the experts say, and all the 12-step meetings say, that it could never be someone else's fault. I mean, you as a spouse may drive your husband crazy, or I don't know, but that doesn't mean he has to go have sex with strangers or have affairs. He could just get a good garden going, So I'm just saying that either way you look at this equation, it's very troubling for this couple. I don't think reconciliation is possible in either case until these things are pulled apart and looked at separately.
And there's a little additional that it's retaliatory.
Right. well, none of it, this just isn't a good situation.
Right.
And good for therapy, ripe for therapy.
Or may not be the right relationship. So, okay, so here is one. So from 5 to 7 a.m. seems to be the strongest time when desire comes up. And in the past, when acting out would occur, porn. I've been sober for 6 months and the need seems to continue to be there. And my mind seems somewhat more focused on sexual desire. Continue to struggle with this, although have not given in. Any advice on how to deal with this?
Okay, do you think this is a male?
Yes, it is.
And do you have
Yes.
any idea that, can we find out his age? If he's under, well, under 50? Do you think he's under 50?
I have no way of knowing.
Okay, so I'll just say this. If you're a male and you're under 35, for sure, we always wake up with erections. Our peak testosterone,
Just under 50.
our testosterone peaks about somewhere within the first hour of waking. So that is when we are the most physically aroused and our testosterone goes down. By the way, if you work out, it's probably best as a male to work out in the morning because you've got that most kind of, bang it up energy. No wonder why I never got, well, anyway, that's a whole other story. Anyway, so, I think morning desire is certainly just natural part of the male cycle. But if you've also kind of rewarded yourself more often than not with porn and masturbation when you were aroused in the morning, then there's going to be a part of you that's going to long for that. It's sort of like when I used to smoke cigarettes. I remember that drinking coffee, because I smoked and drank, they were kind of paired together. When I drank coffee, I wanted to have a cigarette. When I smoked a cigarette, I wanted to drink. And drink a cup of coffee. And so, what I would suggest is you get out of bed. When you wake up, some people lounge in bed, some people, that's great for other people. But if you're a sex addict who has issues in the morning, get your butt out of bed, get in the shower and start your day. And I don't mean that in a confrontive way. It's just like, sometimes we addicts wrestle with things like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get myself out of, and the answer is right in front of you. You don't have to struggle with this because you can just get up.
I was just going to say, I run 3 to 5 miles now. I was going to suggest going for a run, going to the gym or something. So.
A high T person. Yeah, like high testosterone at an older age.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Hang on. I have attended face-to-face support group, general addiction, but there has been no check-in and it seems like the leader does most of the talking. What are the most important features from an effective support group must have to help the sexual porn addict? I really want a face-to-face group, but I'm not sure this one is helping me. I live in a small town and there seems to be very little in this area for support.
Well, Tammy, I think you could answer this question just as well as I could if you wouldn't mind. Like, how do you find a good meeting and, like that?
Well, and I think it's some trial and error and all of, if you're going to general addiction, so any of the 12-step groups are going to have online meetings. Rob does an in the rooms meeting on Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time for sex addiction, but there's a lot of meetings there. And I think it's one of those things where, if you just keep trying, and if they're on this site, please let us know, because if that's happening, I don't get to moderate all of them. Some of them are men, I can't go. But we're really looking for them to be support without being directed, so to speak. So let me know. But
so I want to jump in there, though. I wanted to get a little more
do.
basic than that. There are all kinds of groups online that you can go to talk about all kinds of things. And people are in Facebook groups, and then they're in LinkedIn groups, in all kinds of groups. So I think just differentiating what is really a support group, and then what kinds of support groups are there. There are 12-step support groups. So there's Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Those two programs in particular are welcoming to women, I think, more than some of the others. And they have online meetings. You can go to SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, online, and you'll find their 12-step meetings. They're very welcoming. They have women-only meetings if you're a woman. As Tammy said, in the rooms, there are about 150 12-step meetings a week. That's intherooms.com. And they do have a Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting at 5 o'clock Pacific time, right before I do my show at 6. There are lots of ways to learn about this. I mean, this is sort of a good way to segue to some of the other work we do. Tammy and I do a lot of giving and volunteer work because this is what we believe in, to be honest with you. And it allows us to do the work that we need to do to get paid at the other side of it, which is we run treatment programs. And very few of you will probably end up in treatment with us. And we understand not everyone has the resources, not everyone has the time, not everyone can do that or wants to. But we'd like to make as much else available to you as we can. And most of the stuff actually flows through Tammy's hands in one way or another. So we have podcasts. The show is called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And we're about 40 or 50 shows in. And as Tammy said, we've got experts from all over the country who have taken the time to talk to me about infidelity and relationship healing and what is a healthy relationship, cultural issues, addiction issues. I mean, I just think it's a really meaningful, useful podcast. And listen, if you're having a crappy day and just want to think about recovery, you know, at least you can sit and listen to it and someone's saying something that you might learn from. I also want to say that that I do a lot of blogging, and I blog for Psychology Today. If you ever want to find my blog, it's called, I don't know if you know this, Tammy, it's called Sex and Love in the Digital Age. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you knew the name. And I've been blogging for Psychology Today for probably close to 7 years. There's not much about sex I have not written about for Psychology Today. So, and blogs again are free. Blogs are free, podcasts are free. And what Tammy was mentioning earlier, we run a website through which you're experiencing this conversation called sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And the only thing that is available there, the only reason for it being is to build a community of information and support. And so these drop-in groups are there, these webinars are there. So if you're that person looking for a group, please do stop in with us. If you, but as Tammy said, if you are already attending a group on sex and relationship healing and it is not going well, let us know and we will make sure we attend to it. Anyway, more questions, please.
Well, I want to tag onto that. So there are female sex and love addicts. There are male partner groups. I mean, we really have created opportunities where you can kind of narrow it down to, I think, really what you're looking for. So I really do invite you to do that. The only other question, so if you've got questions, don't hesitate.
I have a question. I see a question.
This one says he is still very angry and wants to.
I think everyone's in the chat.
Oh, I don't have any extra chats.
So, well, why don't I? Now questions are coming in. So I will start lecturing folks if the questions don't come in and you don't want me to lecture. I mean, you do. I'm a pretty good lecturer, but Tammy doesn't want to lecture.
No, I'm always as much as I've heard you present, right. You often say something that I hadn't thought about in that particular way. So this is a little lesson on this stuff. Is like, even if you think you've heard it all, you know, I listen to the podcast and I invariably hear something that is useful and that I didn't know or hadn't thought about in quite that same way. So even listening to them more than once, you can pick up things. So I'd invite you to listen to those. So we've got, I'm a single woman in SLAA. Today is 60 days, no contact with a guy that majorly triggered my addiction. Of all my bottom lines, no dating apps, no casual random sex. This has been the hardest. Why is the no contact still killing me?
Okay. Well, here's the deal, okay? Inside, and I kind of wrote a book about this, so I want to support you. Inside of the most troubled relationships where we attach, there is some love and attachment, you know, and it may not be mutual, or it may not be given in the way each of us needs, or it could be downright abusive on the surface. But when we deeply attach, we attach with love. If you have love, you've attached, and when that love goes away, you're going to hurt. And it doesn't matter, you know, it's like addicts sometimes will say, oh, all these terrible things happened to me, so I'm never going to go do that thing again. Like I got arrested with 3 DUIs, I'm never going to drink again. And then we forget about the DUIs, you know, and it's kind of the same thing here. You know, you're focused on all the awful, and I get it, and you should be, because you can learn from the pain and make better decisions later. But it's unfair to your heart to say, oh, well, because this was a bad relationship, or because it wasn't right for me, or because it triggered me, there wasn't something that meant something to me there. Because maybe there was. And I know that's dangerous territory, because we're very black and white, right, as addicts. And we want to say, oh, if there was something there for me, well, then I can race back and have it. No, whatever was there is still there just as it was. And you don't want to go back because you left before. but you can miss it. You can be sad for it. You can long for it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Anybody leaving a relationship is going to experience grief. And even if the relationship wasn't healthy. So let yourself be a healthy person who lost something that felt connected to them. And don't blame yourself for being human. That's what I say.
Yeah, and great job on 60 days. That's really good. Okay, so on the last question, we missed the mark. So this person is saying, what features must a support group for male porn addicts have? So
male porn addicts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we got more specific.
Yes.
Well, first of all, there is a new group called Porn Addicts Anonymous, and it is come around specific related to all these, really a whole generation of guys who are struggling with some of these issues. And so they wanted their own 12-step program. And I, by the way, didn't understand this because I'm thinking, well, porn, that's sex, porn. So you guys are sex addicts. It's like whiskey is an alcohol, vodka is an alcohol. So either one, you're still an alcoholic, I thought. But then I spent a lot of time talking to porn addicts, and I'd always sort of felt that they were dealing with something different, and they really are. And they will say to me, well, how could I be a sex addict when I haven't had a whole lot of sex, or I've never had sex, or I've never loved anyone and had sex? And it's like, oh, right, you spend all of your time looking at screens. Pixel time is what they call it. So I do understand, just to say it, and in fact, I'm in process of writing about the issue of porn addiction. And I have some very good colleagues who, if you want referrals, and you can write Tammy for that, we will refer you to an online coach or an online support person. I know I haven't answered your question, but I wanted to delve into porn addiction a little bit because it is a separate population. And I think if you're a real strict porn addict, you might go to a sex addicts meeting and feel like it doesn't fit or it's out of place. Those people have been having all this crazy sex. And I would agree with you. I would consider to look for a porn group. Okay. Now, Tammy, do you mind, have I turned this on you a little bit? What are the things that you think, and you have talked, please mention our online porn group that
Yeah.
Because the guy who's doing it is amazing, right? But what do you think makes a group safe online if you're not paying for it? So it's not like a therapy group. If you're just going to a roundup group, what makes it safe?
Well, I do want to talk about, so Noah Church every other Sunday has at 4:30 p.m. has a porn addiction group. Now that is not gender separate. That is just porn addiction, male and female. Then Forrest Benedict has at 8 p.m. on Sunday nights, has a sex and porn addiction, but it's specifically sex and porn addiction. So it's one of those, you may find that to be a good connection. But when I read this, I think one of those things, because I heard you say in your first post that you don't like it when the moderator is talking more. Some people really like that. So I think it's really, what do you find that helps you the most? That's why there's different types of 12-step meetings. There's open meetings where there's a speaker meeting. There's, closed meetings. There's discussion group. There's big book. It really is what is going to support you, and what supports you right now might not be what you need 4 months from now. So I think it's being kind of in tune to what are you finding is missing. Obviously, some solid recovery in the meeting is important, and that it focuses on, I think, the core values. So if it's a 12-step meeting, it's on 12 steps or whatever. I think that those kind of things are important. Your thoughts, Rob?
Well, I think you're right to be cautious. Therapists really aren't fully available online in the way we would like to be over time. We don't have portability. And one of the reasons I give away all of this in part and have real live treatment centers when I think we could do a lot more work online, to be honest with you, is because it's not legal for us to practice in 50 states. I can only practice where I'm licensed. And that's true for every therapist in the country. So I would be cautious. If you're going to work with a therapist, make sure they have a license, make sure they're in your state, make sure that they have a license in therapy. A lot of letters after someone's name doesn't mean a whole lot more than a lot of letters after someone's name. You should look it up. And make sure that people are within their, what we call, scope of practice. Like if they have some experience in the addictions, if they have some experience in sexuality, those are issues things you're going to look for. I wouldn't start paying anybody a whole bunch of money right up front unless I was walking into their office and getting to know them. There are plenty of people all over the country and all over the world who can see you personally. at least initially, so that you can get started. And, basically, I think a good support group, Tammy talked about core values. Everyone is invested in becoming honest. Everyone is invested in becoming a good person and maintaining whatever that means to them. That there is some, and let me, you asked another question. This particular group that we're having right now is exactly what you said you don't like. This is a group where it's not a therapy group, but it's a kind of Q&A. You don't get very involved, but on our site, we do a whole bunch of other kinds of groups. And I think you just have to step into, as Sammy said, some of them. And if people start asking you for money, be suspicious. You kind of always know you're safe if you're truly in a 12-step room and you've come there through their portals, because they really only endorse the meetings that are supportive. But write us a note wherever you are, and I think we can make some suggestions.
And the other thing I'd say is try it more than once, because even my favorite local meeting has an off day and I leave. Rob, one time he called me right after, he said, it must not have been a very good meeting because you usually are like in a different frame of mind afterwards. And I was like, well, it was either me or it was a meeting, whatever. But it was like, kind of like, I can't blame the meeting. Sometimes it's just off. So I try them a couple of times, but if you've done that and it's still not a fit, trust your gut. There are lots of online meetings, and go ahead.
One more thing though, I have to say, having been someone who's sent people to a lot of support groups, is that my experience is people come back often after the first or second time, and they're very uncomfortable that I sent them there. And they heard people say things that are not anything like what they do. They heard people tell stories that are much worse than theirs. And so they went to these groups that I recommended, and they're like, wow, I'm not nearly as sick of those people. And what they forgot to do is listen to the people whose stories were like with them or not as bad, because we tend to, in an unsafe, when we're feeling a little unsafe, kind of, check out our surroundings and what's the worst thing going on here. And, there are people who have offending behaviors. There are people who look at child porn. There are people who do all kinds of stuff. That also may attend those meetings. And so I think you have to look for the common ground, because when we're feeling afraid or uncomfortable or anxious, we're going to look for reasons why we don't belong there. And that's one of the reasons Tammy said, you have to go a few times, because you're always going to be uncomfortable the first time, but go 3 or 4 times to see if it's for you. Oh, and by the way, here's a really good thing. Don't give away any of your personal information. Anybody who asks you in some online group for anything more than your email address, unless you're engaged in actually, some transaction, like they're a treatment center, anybody from some group, don't give them your personal information, no matter how kind or open they've been.
Well, and going back to what you said about the details of the behavior, we may have different stories from that standpoint, but it's the feelings or what happened. We had terrible consequences of our behavior, and I always try to align with those on those emotional or consequences level. So even if my story wasn't exactly the same as somebody else's, I can relate on that level. Okay, next question. I have heard you say something about lying and coming clean with your lies within 48 hours to build trust. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah. So when in early recovery, I'm in early recovery, meaning you and I are married, let's say, I'm making this up, and we've been together for 10 years, and you just found out about a whole bunch of stuff maybe a year ago or 6 months ago, and I've really started to delve into this recovery stuff, and I'm really taking it seriously, and I'm getting into it and I'm working on it. But, last night you asked me if I remembered to stop off at work like I promised you 3 times, and I said, oh yeah, I did. But the reality is I didn't. I just didn't want to face your anger. I didn't want to deal with your frustration. I just lied to you. And later on you find out and you're like, wait a minute, you lied to me. You lied about that. You lied about something so simple as, did you stop by the office? Does that mean you're lying about other things? And the trust goes out the window just like that. So, sorry, I'm going to refer back to the question. So, but it's not automatically true that in early recovery, I am comfortable or familiar with turning to you and just giving you the truth, knowing that you're not going to like it. You're going to be angry at me. And I'm afraid of that anger. I'm afraid, like it or not, I don't man up around your anger. I get really, whatever. And I've been used to lying to you. I'm used to having control over the situation. I'm used to not having to face your angry face. Well, Now I am trying to be honest. And the problem is that you turn to me perfectly appropriately. You are doing nothing wrong. I want to be really clear. And you say, well, what is it? Is it this or that? And in the moment I lie to you, because I've always lied to you and I'm used to lying to you and I'm uncomfortable with your anger and I just don't want to deal with it. And so I try to get away from it. So under those circumstances, all of that, early recovery, someone's just beginning to take on the task of showing up, they are, but they're still not fully, I don't expect as a therapist, someone that's going to, and I tell clients this, hey, and so this is where this came from. As a therapist, knowing who I'm dealing with, actually, I'll back up a step further. Tammy will be amused at this. I have colleagues who work in the field who've been therapists for many, many years, but maybe not so much with addiction or sex addiction, and sometimes I've done supervision with them, or I've, helped consult on cases for them. And I'll have this person who's like, 55 years old, has been doing therapy for 25 years, call me up and say, Rob, you're not going to believe it. And I'm like, what? That client lied to me. I'm like, really? Are they an addict? Are they a sex addict? Okay, what did you expect? So, I already anticipate that in the beginning, part of my building safety with somebody is allowing for some of their vulnerabilities, but also being honest about them. So I used to say to clients when I was seeing them one-on-one, hey, you're probably going to lie to me. You're probably not going to tell me everything. And you know what? That might even start to bother you after a while. So why don't we have a little agreement? And this would be session to session. So it'd be like, if you lie to me, on your third session, when you come in on your fourth session, I expect you to tell me the truth about what happened. Right in that moment, you may feel like you need to lie, you need to look good. That's how, but you and I know that that's not going to, so I would make an agreement with them that we already knew that the automatic action would be to lie, but that we are also saying that what we were sharing as two people trying to work together was an agreement that our goal was to be honest. And that even though we couldn't be honest right away, that he and I knew that honesty was the goal. And that's why he would be able to come back a week later and achieve that goal without feeling like, oh God, I lied to you last week. It's like, hey, so I wasn't ready to tell you last week, and okay, it's cool, and it's starting to come out. So all that being said, I translate that to marriages in these situations, which is kind of like, as an angry spouse, you absolutely have a right to, where have you been? What has happened? I need to know. You were lying for 3 years, and what the F? On the other hand, I'm also know that the person at the other end of that who's saying, oh my God, they're already so angry at me. And if they find out that I looked at porn today, or I don't know if so I suggest the same agreement. The part is that you have to be willing to hold up your part. My part would be, I'm willing to tell you within 48 hours, or if I've lied to you, your part is you're not going to turn and start raging at me. That you're going to take that in. You get to have your feelings about it. But if I'm going to come to you and be honest and just get raged at right in the moment, and you might prepare for that, if I'm going to, anyway, that's a longer conversation. But there is a reason for it, and it really is to encourage honesty to happen without punishment around that. Now, I'm also an addict. As I was saying all of this, I was thinking, oh, this would be great. I could just act out today and tell my spouse, oh, well, I didn't tell you, but you're not allowed to be angry at me because Rob said you're not allowed to. That's not what I'm saying, okay? Just want to be clear. Tammy?
There's always loopholes, aren't there? So.
Well, you're an addict, there are.
I know. I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that one. I am tired. My spouse says I'm a sex addict, but she uses it against me. Is it okay for her to tell me to find someone that wants sex and blowjobs every night?
I think that if you've been cheating on someone and they found out that you've been cheating, that they get to be as angry as they want to be. And you need to man up or woman up and take it, because as a friend said a long time ago, and I'd write this one down, behaviors have consequences. They just do, And if you didn't want your girlfriend to be raging at you, maybe you shouldn't have gone and done the things you did. Now, if you did the things you did because you have an addiction, I completely get that. I have a lot of empathy for your addiction, and I want to support your healing. However, it's your girlfriend, wife, partner's job to be furious at you, because whether you have an addiction or not, you still lied to them. You still broke their heart. You still ruined their world. And that's where they're at. And that deserves respect.
So when do you just give up on an addict that just cannot seem to heal? Partner has been in recovery a year, but still lies and seems to only be in recovery to save face with the family. Actions and behaviors just do not show any real recovery.
I don't think there's, so here's maybe the right answer for this. Tammy, you can tell me if it's a good answer. Um, I don't think you can ever take a measuring stick to the person in your life and say, oh, right, they're at that level now, I can't be with them anymore. I don't think that can be your measure of your marriage. I think your measure has to be what's inside of me. What am I comfortable with? How do I feel? What do I know? What do I want to put up with? Because you can go around these cycles a couple of times, and I'll tell you how addicts are. We're different types. We will always try to push the envelope a little bit, especially in the beginning. But at a certain point, when our fingers get burned enough, we learn our lesson. And if not, then there's really two ways that it goes. Either one, the person got too big for their britches and things got out of control, or they just don't give a poop about your life and they're going to poop on you again. In other words, either the person has not been doing a good job with his recovery because he's not motivated to, or he simply doesn't care, or he's not able. I guess that would be another. He's too depressed, too messed up in other ways. But by taking a measuring tape to the person you love, I can't tell you what's right for you. If we were working together in therapy, which we will not be, but I hope you are with someone, the measure would be, how much love do I feel? How safe do I feel? How much trust do I feel? Am I gnawing my teeth at night, and am I getting an ulcer? Or, am I able to say what he does is fine with him and I'm in the other room and I don't care? People have all kinds of ways of living together. But I think what's painful is unmet expectations. So maybe you should clarify your expectations with your spouse. I expect this. Are you ever going to do that? And if so, okay, when, like by July 1st, August 1st, so that you can actually check that out. If he sees or she sees this as the way it is, then you're going, or I'm doing as good as I can, and F you, then the measure really is inside of you.
I'm going to tag on to that, because the other exception would be if somebody's trying but they're not getting the right level of help. There is that. So what I don't hear in this is, because you said it seems to only be in recovery to save face. So I don't hear, and this is what the addict is doing. So if the addict isn't actively working on recovery, then there really isn't recovery. There may be momentary pieces of sobriety along the way, but not really recovery. I see that as a big shift in behavior and action and everything else. So, Dr. Rob wrote a book, Sex Addiction 101, really good place to start. It's very basic, just, and there's a workbook that, has your loved one work through that. If not, what are they doing? Are they going to S meetings? Are they doing the online things? What are they doing, to make it different?
And, the big one is, does your spouse acknowledge that the way you see it is different than the way he or she sees it? Because I might be perfectly fine with my recovery, and I wish you would just stop nagging me, and maybe your recovery will take you to a place where you'll stop nagging me. And I might not see at all that I'm really breaking your heart. It depends on how, what you're saying is coming across and how I'm hearing it. So this is complex couple stuff. I would really consider this a therapy issue, a treatment issue, especially with a lot of years of family investments.
With a qualified therapist, because there's a lot of people, well-meaning therapists, that don't have the skills to deal with this complex type of issue. So I would invite you. And as Dr. Rob said, if you have any questions, you're looking for qualified help, I know lots of qualified people, email me. Is there any space for sex and love addicts to have sex outside of a committed relationship without losing yourself? This sounds like a single person, so I think.
I know. So, hold on, I want to look at the question, because what I guess this is, so the question is a little difficult, because if you said, I'm in a committed relationship and I've been in recovery for a long time, and my partner and I are at a place after 20 years together where we're interested in exploring opening, or whatever that was, that would be one question. If you said, I'm single and I'm wondering, if I get in a relationship, will I ever be able to have sex outside a relationship? Like, that's a different question. So I think a little more clarity is needed in order to answer that one.
Is there any space for sex and love addicts to have sex outside of a committed relationship without losing your space? So I think it's.
Yes, I think there is. I think there are all kinds of situations, and it's not if you'd asked me that question 20 years ago, I think there was a lot more of a A lot more judgment in our field about people who'd acted out sexually, and it was kind of like they did that, so now they need to be in this box, and that's the way it goes. And I don't think that I think that we're not there right now, and that there are all kinds of ways that people can express themselves sexually. But I would tell you this: I would never make that decision without talking about it with a therapist, a sponsor, a support group. Like I would never. In fact, I would suggest, just let me be really clear. I'm going to give you guys, any sex or love addicts here, let me give you the best advice I can possibly give you about your sex or love life. Um, if you were not a sex or love addict, you can date who you want, have sex when you want, you know, you'll make a mistake, you'll learn from it. You can date someone for a while and it doesn't go well and you'll grieve it and move on, and because that's what healthy people do. But if you're in this place, in this room, in this space, and you really have these issues, then you are not the best decision maker for your own love life. That's the deal. It doesn't mean you can't have love. It doesn't mean you can't have sex. It does mean, especially in the beginning, that you are not the best decision maker about this. If I asked Tammy when she is actively drinking and using, if she minded going and drinking, and she wouldn't call me to ask me if it was okay to drink and use. She just would have gone ahead and drink and use. People who need that kind of help aren't always aware of what they need, where they need, how they need it. So none of these decisions would be made or discussions would be held without a lot of support and direction and guide. And some of those experts that we know. And by the way, I did want to say something about that. When we make a referral, we do not get kickbacks. No one sends us a subscription to Time Magazine or Reader's Digest. We just have friends that we know who do good work around the country.
And we know, well, around the world, actually. So we know people outside of the US as well. So, but I also know, I mean, when somebody's asking for help, I try to discern what they really are looking for, because there's so many different specialties within this niche field.
Right.
So I really do try to find somebody qualified to help you with what you're looking for. So, okay, I'm a male sex addict in recovery, and my goal is to help other sex addicts at a professional level, just like you and Tammy did after 2 years of sobriety. At least you have, as you have advised. But I have doubts that I will ever be able to be free from sexual temptations and be in a position to help others. I feel like I will be acting out sexually with my future clients. Will these doubts go away after years of sobriety? I'm in early recovery, by the way, 5 months.
Well, first of all, I think these are really the right questions to be asking, and I really am impressed that you are asking them. I'll tell you what Pat Carnes told me. I remember back in quite a long time ago, a good 20 some odd years ago, I was struggling, or more maybe. Dr. Carnes was here in town and I was struggling with my own recovery, and who am I going to talk to about it? Well, I had the guy there. So I said, hey, Dr. Carnes, how is it that I can be a professional if I'm struggling with my recovery? And he said, well, some people need to do other things for a living. And what he meant was, you either get to struggle with your recovery or you get to do this work. If you're someone who thinks that you might ever be vulnerable to being sexual with a client, then you have to, create a career around which that can never happen. And, but I think that there's multiple questions in here, because, you could certainly work with sex addicts. If you're a straight guy and you work with male sex addicts who are straight, I don't see that would be an issue. But if you're a male sex addict and you're not in good recovery and you're working with wives, that might be a different issue. I think that for me as a professional, and I will say this to you, for me, this is my experience. I remember some of those fears. They were more like, what if I'm attracted to a client? That was more the fear. Like, what if I find a client attractive? Or what if a client comes on to me? Or what if I feel like, I looked at their body and I found them attractive and they noticed? Like, those were the kinds of questions I asked myself as an early therapist. And, I learned pretty quick that I really respected these people. I really loved these people who came to see me. I was never going to do anything to hurt them. And so I was never going to be sexual with them, and I was never going to flirt with. I just knew that, like, there was a rock solid wall inside of me that may be different for some other people. And you won't know until you start doing the work. Your fears may be very different than your reality. But the most important thing you can do is be in supervision, be in therapy, be with your sponsor so that you're never alone. You know, what I was saying earlier about, you know, we are not people who should make decisions on our own around sex and love. I make great decisions around, I just bought a bedroom set. It's really beautiful. It looks great in my house. I make really good design decisions. But, you know, should I be going out and having an affair? Probably not. Do I feel like I'd like to have one? Yes. What might be the thing that keeps me from that? Calling that sponsor, calling that therapist, calling that friend and saying, hey, I'm thinking today would be a great idea to have an affair today. What do you think? Because I don't make decisions around my sex and love life alone, not even to date, because I know better. And that's a handicap and a gift, because we get to have guides from people. We get to have amazing people to guide us, but we don't get to do what we want, when we want to do it, whenever we want, because have these issues.
So I want to tag on a bunch of things. First of all, 5 months of recovery and 2 years of recovery, you are in a different place. So I love that you're asking these questions and you're concerned about it. Like Dr. Rob said, you can set up all kinds of parameters. You know, as he said, if you're a heterosexual male, you only work with male clients, great. Tim Stein on our sexandrelationshiphealing.com site has a professionals meeting. There's a password that is required to get into it because we want to have a safe place for professionals to connect on our site. It's a drop-in group. It's another spot. And there's something else I was thinking about. I don't know a therapist that hasn't had transference and countertransference issues. I mean, it's just part of it. So I think the thing is you own it too. You know, you have to at some point own it, even if you're doing this. What are you saying?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, you know, that was the first thing that struck me. And I just want to say it is like, there's something in one of the 12-step programs for sexual recovery that says it will take years for the lust of the mind to drain away. And I do think that there is a truth in when you're used to just looking at body parts, you're just looking at boobs and butts, you know, it's like, yeah, that's how you're going to see people. And you do need to push yourself to look people in the eye and stop, you know, really seeing people as body part. You need to grow in order to grow as a person and all of that. But you're human. And if you're male, you're going to see people and say, oh, that person's cute. And that's human. And one of the most important things I think that we need to understand as sex addicts is that we've actually been afraid of our sexuality. We don't allow ourselves to feel it and then tolerate it and then say, oh, that's nice. I had this warm feeling about this attractive person. We run to fixing that feeling by going to have the sex, you know? So one of the things that, you know, is extremely important is for you to acknowledge that you're going to have sexual feelings, and no amount of recovery is or should take that away from you. It's like saying to somebody, you know, now we've helped you with your eating disorder, so you'll never be hungry again. It doesn't work that way. You know, part of recovery is learning to tolerate and manage the feelings that you have, not hoping they're going to go away. I remember a guy once, and this is a sad and somewhat misogynistic story, but I remember a guy once who went out shopping for something right before he came to group therapy with me. He was in group, and came in a group and he was really, really angry. And we asked, you know, what's going on with you? And he said, I cannot believe that the woman at the restaurant where I went to get dinner was wearing such a low cut top. Like, didn't she realize how triggering that was for me and how difficult it was for me to sit there while she was serving me? And, you know, I think that's someone, for example, who really doesn't want to take any responsibility for their own arousal. And you have to, as a therapist, as a professional, and in your recovery, come to terms with your sexuality, not hope it will go away.
I want to tag on, I've known a lot of therapists not a lot. There have been a handful of therapists over the years I've known them that have gotten into trouble with this. And what I consistently found is they forgot to put their recovery first. They weren't taking care of themselves. And I think they got to the mindset of, because I'm a professional doing this, I don't need to go to my program. I don't need to talk to my sponsor. I don't need to do my personal work. I think the great therapists have their own therapist. They have their own support group. They have peer support, whatever it is that they need to be able to do the work. A lot of people working in the sex addiction field, not everybody, but they are in an office with other therapists so that they can debrief, you know, and whatever they need to do to keep themselves in a safe place. So there's lots of ways to set it up, but I would continue to think about your professional life. Give yourself the space to get to 2 years, one day at a time.
And I want to encourage what Tammy said. You know, every week we have a therapist who volunteers his time to run a support group for therapists or lawyers or doctors, or we don't have anything to do with it. I mean, in the sense that we're not connecting with you guys, we're not taking your email, you know, all we do is provide the space. And so if you want to listen to other professionals who also probably struggle with, I'm a divorce attorney and this really attractive woman getting a divorce came into my office, you know, you probably want to go to that group. It's useful to hear those kinds of stories. And just write Tammy if you can't find it, she'll send you a note.
Well, you have to get it, it's a password, so you do have to write me, and you have to tell me what your profession is, because it's for licensed professionals, mental health professionals.
Or on the way to licensure.
What, right.
We'll accept you.
But yeah, interns still have a license, so it's okay. All right. The next question. My SA husband, who is addicted to dating apps and porn, has been sober for 2 months. He has been in therapy for 10 months. He is behaving like an angry, dry drunk, expressing a lot of resentment, bitterness, blaming. He is not attending a 12-step group, which I think would help with his attitude. I have plenty of support, but I'm having difficulty coping with his anger toward me. Do you have any other suggestions besides support groups and therapy to help me cope with this? Is there hope for this dry drunk phase will pass?
Well, I just feel sad for you. You know what, I mean, it's bad enough to have somebody break your heart, cheating, lying, whatever. And then I'll just say it for the spouses, then you're supposed to understand that somehow they have a problem and it wasn't their fault and they didn't mean to break your heart. And then on top of that, you know, your husband's an asshole. I mean, he's not taking responsibilities for, he's treating you badly, like you did something wrong. And I think all anybody does when they say on any level, I want you to stop this behavior, is I want to stay connected to you. You know, and I can't do it if you keep cheating. I can't do it if you keep lying. I can't do it if you keep looking at the porn. I can't stay with you. And so, you know, this is where some of the rubber meets the road. Someone asked earlier, how do I know when my spouse is on the road to recovery and when they're not? How would I know whether to be with them or not? And my answer is the same to you. You know, I think that if your partner, let me make it more refined, okay? If you tell me that you have a problem and we're married, and you tell me that it's something that you can work on and you're going to work on it, and I'm staying with you or being civil to you or being kind to you as your spouse because you told me that it's a problem and you're going to work on it, and that's why I'm sticking around, then there is nothing wrong with me as a spouse having reasonable expectations to say, so what am I going to see? Like, are you going to be going to groups? Are you going to be going to therapy? Like, what is going to make this change happen that you've promised me? Because I would suggest to you that dry drunk is one way to look at it, or he may just be acting out still. And how would you know? Because he's not, I mean, he would resent you more if he was having to cover up more, had less time to do whatever his thing was. Why would you think he's sober if he's not? Why would you think his behavior's changed just because he said so? I only believe that change happens when I see change happening. That's when change is happening, when I see it in front of me, not when it's promised, not when it's encouraged, not when it's written. I want to see change happen. And you as a spouse have every right to say, you know what, I've put up with this. Now I want to see change happen. And you tell me what is going to be, what are the steps going to be toward that change? Are we going to go to couples therapy? Are we going to go to individual? Are we going to, because to sit around, especially in a young relationship, I'm guessing, and say, boy, I hope it gets better. Is this person going to treat me better at some point? Is a kind of a place of a victim. You know, you're sitting there saying, oh gosh, you know, I hope things get better. I want you to stand more in, you know what, I'm only going to put up with so much. That's where I want you to be, because love is blind, but you're not being treated very nicely. So.
Well, and I think, you know, with this too, it's like with dating apps and porn, that usually is or often is a multi-hour a day addiction. And if you're going to therapy 1 hour or 50 minutes a week, there's all this time. If he's not going to 12-step groups, if he's not engaging in other positive recovery things, You know, it's there, it's out of balance, you know.
And I want you to notice this, Tammy, because I think you will agree with me. Notice this person has said something. She said, thanks,
Oh,
she said, thanks, he's done. This is, I'm quoting you now. Thanks, he has done therapy, treatment, sponsors, and meetings. And I read that, and my first response is, you mean he's started by a sponsor? Because 10 months is the beginning. You know, people are going to be in therapy for a couple of years with this issue, and then maybe some couples therapy. You're going to be in meetings for years and years. If this is not, if this is a definable problem, as you put it. So even the fact that you respond to us by saying he's done this, I'm thinking, why would you be thinking he's done it? I would be using the word he's started. Um,
well,
I
and he's not willing to attend 12-step groups. So he's did some meetings and now he won't. And he's only been sober for 2 months, even though he's been going to therapy for 10
right.
months.
So this means that, you know, who's really running the show here? So it's up to you, you know, what is going to drive change? As long as you are able to tolerate a lack of change, nothing will change. And I hesitate to advise you further, but there are a lot of supportive therapists and people out there that we can help. You know, you can only point, okay, I'll try it this way. You can only dig at a dry well for so long, and then you got to realize it's just not giving any water. And I've had people say, no, that well, I promise it had water last week. You know, if you just keep digging, and there's a certain point, and I'm not saying you have to end your relationship, but sometimes you might have to find a way to have more dignity for yourself in this relationship, whatever that means to you. And Tammy, I want to honor you for your time tonight. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Folks, if you want to find us, the podcast is Sex, Love, and Addiction. And that's where we are. That's where I am all the time. Come listen. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.